Welcome to English Stories. Marguerite Devereux was dying. Although she was only 56 years old, she looked at least 75. She gasped for breath, her face wider than the sheets. She was shivering violently from cold. Her face was shaking in pain and her eyes looked tired, as if she saw something horrible. Her elder sister Suzanne, 6 years older than herself, was sobbing on her knees beside the bed. A small table close to the dying woman's couch, for on a white cloth 2 lighted candles. The priest was expected at any moment, so that Marguerite can share her feelings and thoughts at a spiritual level. Their house looked deathly, as if it was ready for a sad farewell. Medicine bottles were scattered on the furniture. Clothes were spread. The chairs looked very untidy, as if they were terrified and had ran in all directions. Death, terrible death, was in the room, hidden, awaiting his prey. This history of the 2 sisters was an affecting one. It was spoken of far and wide. It had drawn tears from many eyes. Suzanne the elder had once been passionately loved by a young man whom she also loved a lot. They were engaged and very soon were going to be married. But few days before the wedding, Henry de Saint-Pierre died suddenly. The young girl's pain and loss was terrible, and she took an oath never to marry. She faithfully kept her vow and adopted a widow's life for the rest of her life. But one morning her sister, her little sister Marguerite, then only 12 years old, threw herself into Suzanne's arms, sobbing, "Sister, I don't want you to be unhappy. I don't want you to mourn all your life. I'll never leave you, never, never. I shall never marry either. I'll stay with you always, always." Suzanne kissed her, touched by the child's devotion, although she did not believe that Marguerite keep her promise. But the little sister kept her promise and never married. Even her parents forced her to marry. She was remarkably pretty but refused many offers. She never left her sister. They spent their whole life together, without a single day's separation. They went everywhere together and were inseparable. But Marguerite was always serious, sorrowful and sadder than her sister, as if her sacrifice of notting anyone had taken away her liveliness. She grew older more quickly. Her hair was white at 30 and she was often ill. She was becoming very thin and weak every day. And now she would be the first to die. She had not spoken for 24 hours except to whisper at daybreak, "Call the priest at once." And she had remained lying on her back, shivering with pain, her lips moving as if unable to speak the terrible words that were filled in her heart. Her facial expression was a very painful sight to watch. Suzanne was filled with grief. She was sitting beside the bed crying, bitterly repeating over and over again the words, "Margot, my poor Margot, my little one." She had always called her my little one, while Marguerite always called Susanna's sister. The sound of footsteps was heard. The door opened. The priest and his assistant entered into the room. As soon as Marguerite saw him, she sat up. Suddenly in bed, opened her lips, stammered a few words and began to scratch the bedclothes as if she would have made hole in them. Father Simon approached, took her hand, kissed her on the forehead and said in a gentle voice, "May God pardon you, since my daughter. Be of good courage. Now is the moment to confess the truth to your sister. Speak." Marguerite was shivering from head to foot so much that even the bed shook with her nervous movements. Then she said, "Sit down, sister, and listen." The priest stooped towards Suzanne, raised her to her feet, placed her in a chair, and taking a hand of each of the sisters, said, "Lord God, send them strength. Give your mercy to them." And Marguerite began to speak. The words which came out from her lips were rough, uncontrolled, and shaking. Forgive me, sister. Please, I am very sorry. Oh, you don't know how much afraid I have been waiting for this moment all my life." Suzanne stammered through her tears. "But why I have to forgive you, my little one? You have given me everything, sacrificed all to me. You are an angel." But Marguerite interrupted her. Be silent, be silent. Let me speak. Don't stop me. It is terrible. Let me tell all to the very end without interruption. Listen. You remember Henry." Suzanne trembled and looked at her sister. The younger sister went on. "In order to understand, you must hear everything. I was 12 years old, only 12, you remember, don't you? And I was spoiled, I did just as I pleased. You remember how everybody spoiled me. Listen. The first time he came on a horse, he dismounted saying that he had a message for father. You remember, don't you? Don't speak. Listen. When I saw him, I was struck with admiration. I found him so handsome, and I stayed in a corner of the drawing room all the time when he was talking. Children are strange and terrible. Yes, indeed, I started to dream of him. He came again many times. I looked at him with all my eyes, all my heart. I know I was very young to love him, but I was very careful and no one suspected me. He came often. I thought only of him. I often whisper to myself, Henry, Henry de Saint-Pierre. Then I was told that he was going to marry you. That was a shock for me. Oh sister, a terrible shock. I cried 3 nights and did not sleep. He came every afternoon after lunch. You remember, don't you? Don't answer. Listen. You used to make cakes that he was very fond of. Oh, I know how to make them. I could make them still if necessary. He would swallow them at one mouthful and wash them down with a glass of wine, saying delicious. Do you remember the way he said it? I was jealous, very jealous. Your wedding day was coming nearer. It was only a few days away. I was very disturbed and mad in love. I said to myself, he shall not marry. Suzanne, no, he shall not. He shall marry me when I am old enough. I shall never love anyone except him. But one evening 10 days before the wedding you went for a walk with him in the moonlight before the house. You both sat under the pine tree, the big pine tree. You both looked into each other's eyes for so long and made promises of love. And he helped you in his arms for so long. You remember, don't you? It was probably the first time. You were so pale when you came back to the drawing room. I saw you. I was there hidden behind a tree. I was mad with anger. I would have killed you both if I could. I said to myself, he shall never marry. Suzanne, never. He shall marry no one. I could not bear it. And all at once I began to hate him intensely. Then do you know what I did? Listen. I had seen the gardener prepare powder for killing street dogs. He would crush a glass bottle into small pieces with a stone and put the powder of glass into a ball of meat. I stole a small medicine bottle from Mother's room. I ground it fine with a hammer and hid the glass in my pocket. It was a shining powder. The next day, when you had made your little cakes, I opened them with a knife and put the glass powder in it. He ate 3. I ate 1 myself. I threw the 6 others into the pond. The 2 swans died 3 days later. You remember. Oh, don't speak. Listen, please listen. I along did not die. But I have always been ill. He died, but I did not. It was most terrible. My life, all my life, was such a torture. I said to myself, I will never leave my sister. And on my deathbed I will tell her all. And now I have told. And I have always thought of this moment. The moment when I will tell you the truth. Now the moment has come. It is terrible. Oh. Sister, please forgive me. I have always thought morning and evening, day and night, I shall have to tell her someday. I waited. The horror of it. It is done. Don't say anything. Now I am afraid. Afraid of seeing Henry again when I am dead. See him again. Only to think of it. I dare not, yet I must. I am going to die. I want you to forgive me. I insist on it. I cannot meet him without your forgiveness. Oh, tell her to forgive me, Father. Tell her. I beg you. I cannot die without it. Marguerite was silent and lay back, trying to breathe. Suzanne had hidden her face in her hands and did not move. She was thinking of him whom she had loved so long. What a life of happiness they might have had together. She saw him again in the dim and distant past, that past forever lost. Beloved dead. Her heart gets filled with love when she think of him. She had retained the memory of their love in her soul. The priest rose suddenly and in a firm, loud voice said, Madame Suzanne, your sister is dying. Then Suzanne, raising her tear-stained face, put her arms around her sister and